Allie Shaw with the Prosper Project, and last time I spoke about work and how work is not only important, but that the money we get paid when we do work, it's important the value that that money holds, because that money is holding things like the value of our time, our effort, and our energy. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to compare and contrast how the U.S. monetary system works to hold the value of our work, our time, effort, and energy, and how the Bitcoin monetary system works to hold our time, effort, and energy. So we're going to compare and contrast the two. So let's talk about the U.S. monetary system first. One of the questions I had to ask myself when I was looking into monetary systems and how they function was, how often do I think about money? I think about money all the time. Whether you're getting up in the morning and deciding whether or not you should pack your lunch or you should buy it, or are you going to get that fantastic cup of coffee from the coffee shop up the street, or are you going to make it at home? We are constantly making decisions about money. So we think about money a lot. But if we think about it so much, do we actually know how it works? I mentioned it at the very beginning, and it's pretty simple what money is supposed to do. Money is actually supposed to accurately reflect the value of our work. And what do I mean by that? It's to accurately reflect the value of the time, effort, and energy we put into work to be paid. So it's really pretty simple what money needs to do. It needs to hold that value so that we can spend that value in the future. So, I'm talking about this in the context of systems, right? Well, systems are actually very personal. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'll tell you a story of how the way systems work is not simply some kind of theoretical thing, but it has real implications on real people. Let's backtrack way back in the 1900s. So in the 1930s, which I'm sure many of you remember, was the Great Depression. The value of my great-grandfather's work was destroyed because of bank mismanagement. Now, I'm sure you all have relatives that have been affected by the Great Depression, so this story is not unique, because the reality was, for my great-grandfather, he put his life savings into the bank. The bank played around with it, and they lost all of it. So he had a lifetime of savings that just disappeared. But it wasn't just the money, right? It was the time, the effort, the energy, all of these things that money represented. So you may say, okay, Allie, that was like almost 100 years ago, right? So let's fast forward just a little bit to the 1980s. And some of you may remember your grandparents talking about this or something like that. But in the 1980s, there was a huge agricultural crash. And in 1986, the value of my father's work was destroyed because of government mismanagement this time. Again, back in the day with my great-grandfather, it was bank mismanagement. This time, it was government mismanagement. So what happened in the 1980s? Well, what happened was inflation had gotten so bad that the government said, hey, we've got to get a handle on inflation, so we have to make it harder to borrow money. So what did they do? They jacked up interest rates on loans. So people like my father, small farmers across the entire United States, were taking out loans at 24% interest. And my father's not going out and buying a Porsche with that. He's buying equipment. He's buying seed. He's buying fertilizer. In the agricultural crash, my family lost everything. And so all that to say, when we talk about these systems, there's a very personal aspect to them because it's important how they run on a human level. So getting back to monetary systems yet again, and not just the personal cost, but how they function, let's ask a really basic question. Why do we even need money? Really, that's pretty simple too. We need money because it makes it easier to trade. Like if I tried to trade this microphone for your car, that would be bartering, right? And that just doesn't work. So we have to have money in order to trade so that we don't have to barter anymore. So very simple why we actually need it. So let's talk about how it works. What is a monetary system? It's just a system that creates, distributes, and regulates, you guessed it, money. Like this $100 bill right here. So I'm holding this. This is a physical $100 bill, but the vast majority of us don't use cash anymore, right? We use digital money. So how does that digital money actually work? Well, there's the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank, and it controls our monetary system. So what happens is the local banks keep track of our digital money. So they're keeping track of my dollars and your dollars and making sure that we don't own the same dollars, right? Digitally. And they're reporting that to the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is keeping track. It's just a giant database of the money and who owns it. And the reality is that because the central bank is in control of the monetary system, they're in control of the creation of how much money is in the monetary system. Now, why is that important? Well, we'll get to that in just a second, but let's look very briefly at which terms mean increasing the money in the monetary system, because that's not what they're going to tell you. They're not going to say, oh, we're going to put more money into the system. They're going to say, oh, we have a quantitative easing policy, or there's bailout financing, or there's a negative interest rate policy. There's all sorts of terminology that's used, but in effect, what it means is we are going to create more dollars to put into the system. That seems like a good thing, right? Oh, we have more money in the system. Shouldn't we feel wealthier? Well, the number of dollars in the system currently has grown more than 75 times over the past 60 years. And that means it's gone from 286 billion to over 22 trillion. So why don't we feel wealthier? There's that much more money in the system. Well, Adam Smith knew this years and years ago, because wealth does not consist in money or in gold and silver, but in what money purchases. So this is a very, very simple equation, and it allows you to figure out what your purchasing power is. So your purchasing power is how many dollars you have divided by dollars in the system. That's literally it. That's how you determine your purchasing power. So for example, if I have $100, just me personally, I have $100. And I divide that by, let's say, $1,000. I can buy 10% of what's in the system, right? But if I have $100, yippee, and they increase the amount of money in the system to $2,000, well, it cuts my purchasing power in half. I can only buy 5% of the things in the system. So the increase in money, the creation, distribution, and regulation of money doesn't make us feel wealthier because it cuts our purchasing power, essentially. So just as a brief example, we'll go back to close to around the Great Depression. So in 1935, the purchasing power of the US dollar was basically $1. Fast forward 90 years, and the purchasing power of a dollar is now 5 cents. So what can you buy with 5 cents now? Maybe a stick of gum from your friend? Something like that. You certainly can't buy anything at the store for $1 because the purchasing power has gone down so much. So now that we've talked about the problem, let's talk about the Bitcoin monetary system and how the Bitcoin monetary system actually solves these problems. But I'm sure you have a very basic question about this. What is Bitcoin? Well, it's a monetary system. I mean, very simply, it is a technological innovation that creates, distributes, and regulates its own money. It runs on software, and it's controlled, and this is very important, it is controlled by the rules built into the software. Remember what I said about the US monetary system and how they talk about quantitative easing, liquidity, zero interest rate policy, that type of thing? They're not making those decisions based on the protocols of the system. They're making those decisions based on their own human standpoint. So the important difference between the way the US monetary system runs and the Bitcoin monetary system runs is that Bitcoin functions according to the math and the cryptography and the rules built into its system. So let's talk about those rules since they bind the entire system together. Rule number 1 is scarcity. The amount of Bitcoin in the system is 21 million. That number will not be changed because it is built into the system. So that's the first very important rule in Bitcoin, is that it is scarce. And there is no way to increase the amount of Bitcoin in the system. The other rule number 2, that's also so incredibly important, and the reason it's different from any other monetary system is that it is decentralized. So you may have heard that term before. Most people don't understand how important it is that something is decentralized. Basically, that means that there is no one person or one company that controls the entire system. Instead, the system is self-sustaining because it's a software, and everyone who is running the system is maintaining the rules. So it is not ruled by one party, one country, one person, one company. It is decentralized based on its rules. Some people are kind of like, well, how do we know that it's only going to be 21 million coins? Well, Bitcoin protocol permanently caps the total supply of Bitcoin at 21 million coins. And it has never been hacked. Yet another very, very important point. Bitcoin, the software, has never been hacked, but the exchanges surrounding it can be hacked. And that's important to know because if you're exchanging US dollars for Bitcoin, the Bitcoin itself has never been hacked, the protocol, the system, the rules, but exchanges can be. All right, last point, because I know this can be very disconcerting, is the volatility in the price. And believe me, I feel it. Today is February the 24th, 2026. And Bitcoin has actually fallen from its all-time high of 126 this summer down to, I think it was about 64,000 per coin today, like earlier today. So that's a significant drop. And I will be honest with you, it's hard to stomach sometimes. But the reason that Bitcoin is volatile is because people are choosing whether or not to use it. People like you and me are determining whether or not they're going to use it. And so the people who are buying and selling it are what kind of determine those highs and lows. So it's kind of like a small boat in a big ocean, right? Like it is weathering the waves. It's weathering everything that the economy, et cetera, is throwing at it. But you feel it. Much more than a big asset like the US dollar, because the US dollar is like, a barge in the ocean. It's going down, but you don't feel it the way you do with something like Bitcoin. But just as a brief reminder, when you're in doubt, just zoom out. So look at the price history over the course of the past few years. So you can see it was created in 2008/2009, and there's a lot of dips in there. you can see how many tips there are, yearly, daily, that kind of thing. Bitcoin is almost like a living organism, like it is constantly moving, constantly moving. But if you pull back to every 4 years, when you look at its trajectory, it's only ever gone up because people understand that they need it. So, in closing, that's the difference between the US dollar monetary system and the Bitcoin monetary system. Fundamentally, the Bitcoin monetary system was created because it recognized human greed. It recognized how when one entity or one bank or one whatever is in charge of an entire monetary system, greed, if it is not held in check, can take over. And that's why those rules and protocols were built into the Bitcoin monetary system. So, in conclusion, we have something now that my father and my great-grandfather never had. We have a choice. They had to use whatever system was given to them. We now have a consent-based, voluntary monetary system that is solving problems that we see in the digital age. And in light of that, Bitcoin is better money because it solves these problems. So stick around for more. We've got more videos coming your way.